Hi, everybody. John Haldy with Haldy Tech here, and I'm excited to have Steve Crawford back for part 3 of our video series. Today's topic is going to be about how to keep drivers once they're part of your team. Before we get started, though, and before I introduce Steve, I just wanted to remind everybody that the reason we're doing these videos is that we at Haldy Tech feel like there's not enough opportunities for contractors to get to know each other and to learn from each other. So we're just trying as a public service to take these opportunities with guys like Steve who are willing to share, to capture it on video, because so often I talk to folks and I wish I had a record button that I had pushed beforehand. So that's what we're doing. So if you have any feedback on things that we're doing wrong or doing right and things that you might want to see in the future, please reach out to me, reach out to Steve. If it's with a different guest or a different topic, I'd love to hear it and I'll try to get it done for you. So with that, Steve, welcome back. Do you mind giving the folks who haven't seen any of the previous ones a very quick rundown of who you are?
Yeah, I've been in transportation for say 50 years. My dad had a trucking company. I started my own business 30 years ago. I started with FedEx Ground 26 years ago. I built a Linehaul operation, sold part of it a year ago. And then I'm running the remaining business that I have right now. But I'm at that stage of life where helping others get to where they need to be is part of what I enjoy doing. When I was young, somebody helped me along and I'm paying it forward.
Super. And today's topic, did I get that right? We're going to talk about keeping the drivers you've got, right?
Right.
So I'm going to start with something that I'm very curious about, because you hear all about how hard it is to get drivers today. There's a huge shortage of drivers. What's different today about maybe in the past, because you've been doing this a long time, about keeping drivers? Because I'm sure we're going to talk about the basic blocking and tackling, but how is it different than, say, 5 years ago?
Well, and maybe you go back even further than that. I would even go so far as to say, if you had this in a general conversation, what does it take to keep employees? Going back to when I was growing up, the 60s and 70s, go to school, get good grades, go to a good college, go to work for a big company, retire from there after 40 years, you'll have a pension and a watch. And those days, that was the industrial era, so to speak. We're in the post-industrial age right now. And so in the information age and the e-commerce is just driving so much supply chain these days. People are more mobile. And so it's not that they're not loyal. It's just that because of, I can go online right now and shop for a house in Florida or Arizona or something like that and say, hey, I'm moving in a month. And you can do that. Years ago, we didn't have that capability. So one of the things that we have to accept as business owners is that we want to be able to keep the people as long as possible, but that 20, 30, 40 year retention, say, is not realistic for 2022. But how long can we keep them? If we can keep them 3 years, 5 years, with the business that I sold, we had people that were there, 12, 15, 20 plus years. The business that I have right now, we just, I just started that business in 2013. So we're looking at 9 years. I've got people that have been with me 7, 8 years and whatever. So you got a core group that will stay. You're always going to have some at the bottom that will churn. And, part of it is, knowing when to let them go, or if somebody is leaving, it's okay. We got to replace them. But if you have a good person on your team and they're performing well for you, you want to be able to retain them. And to me, it falls underneath 2 categories, either our words or our actions. And the thing on words is just a matter of praising. Because of technology, there's so many things that have been great for having this technology. But one of the downside is we're losing some of the human interaction touch. It used to be you had an office and a shop and the drivers would come in and you'd see them and talk to them and things like that. We're so mobile now, and that's what they call social media, but it's not really very social. I mean, people get on there and argue and do all this kind of stuff. And so, I've got all these drivers that work with us, but I don't necessarily see them. So one of the things that we've tried, and we have to try harder, is to have some Zoom meetings. And there's no reason you couldn't do a safety meeting, for example, as Zoom, or have a rewards meeting, whatever, as a Zoom. Even if you want to talk to 2 or 3 drivers, just like you and I are having a conversation, we could use any numbers of technology. So, but reinforcing to the drivers, this is just a basic human need. People want to know that they're making a contribution. They want to know that their work matters. And that can be really frustrating at FedEx because you sit in the line haul office and you wait and you're told you're going to go here. No, you change your load, you're going to go there. And you get out to the other end and you might have to sit and wait. And it's easy for a driver to feel unappreciated. And as business owners and as leaders, and as if we care about our people, sometimes just verbal reinforcement, and that would include, sometimes I have to listen to the same story that I've heard dozens of times, might hear it repeated by the same driver, but it's obviously a hot button for them. But it's really interesting. The truck drivers want a job where they don't have a supervisor looking over their shoulder, so they want freedom and independence. But a truck driver will go to a truck stop and sit for an hour or more and talk to a stranger about what's going on in his life, because they still, as human beings, we want to have connection with people. So, and I, when I'm pointing my finger, I got three pointing back at me. I'm not as good at this as I should be, because as your organization grows, you have more and more people. And so I'm trusting my team leaders to be doing the same thing. And one of the things that we've done here, we just rolled it out this year, is we're letting our team leaders identify somebody that's done, the attaboy, attagirl type thing, let us know, and we're giving them a gift card, and it doesn't have to be huge, just the fact that you give them a gift card to a truck stop, to a convenience store, to Walmart, Target, wherever it is, grocery store. Just you've recognized them and said, hey, you made a contribution to our efforts here and we appreciate it. Those things don't cost a lot of money, but they really go a long way in helping retain your people.
You mentioned something that piqued my curiosity. The day-to-day life of a driver going to the terminal, to another terminal, going to FedEx customers, swapping trailers for spots, those kinds of things. Is there a risk that even though the driver works for you, for example, they're actually interacting with FedEx so much that in some weird way they think that FedEx is the boss because they drive for FedEx Ground, they wear a FedEx uniform? And I can't imagine that FedEx is spending a lot of time to make those drivers feel appreciated.
Yeah, that is a challenge that I recognized long ago, is that the drivers have to understand that they work for me. And I don't mean that in a real authoritative, I'm the boss, that's not the point. But hey, I'm your leader. I'm the person that's providing you the paycheck. And I say this so much to my team, and I know they appreciate it. I've got your back. I had this problem at FedEx. They did this or did that. I got your back. Don't worry about this. I'll take care of it. Because you've got some people at FedEx that are, because they're a third party, it's not that they're, intentionally vicious or vindicative or anything like that, but they're just, they face it, we're a vendor. And so they're just like, hey, here's your load, and they don't care. I guess that's a rough way to put it, but part of their job description as a dispatcher is not to, they're not told that, hey, you got to hurry or worry or do anything about the feelings of a driver. They're charged with one thing. We got the packages that are here, and they need to be there. A couple of videos ago, you were talking about we're in I had said it was the fulfillment business. We're in the fleet management and employee sourcing business with FedEx. And so we have to take care of the employee, and we need to understand what's going on at FedEx so we can be a buffer to absorb some of that shock.
Right. And I would have to think if they're going 3-4 terminals a day and they're not getting any sense of appreciation from FedEx, that the job for you as an owner is to fill that gap and take away any negativity they have from that and make them feel appreciated, to over communicate if need be.
Right. And I've mentioned at other times, I'm an avid follower of a guy named Pat Lencioni. And he's, one of the things that he's big on is that your communication has to be very clear. And then, and 4 of the steps that he has, one of them is to over communicate clarity. That you can't over. I don't know. Maybe you could be real sappy or something like that, but I don't think people get tired of hearing that. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing.
What are some of the things that you would recommend for anybody out there who's in line haul to do with their drivers, whether it's words or deeds? What are the recommended things that you think work, and what, or maybe we should turn it the other way around? What doesn't work?
Well, I guess, there's probably a better way to put that is something that works for me may not work for somebody else. I'm in the short haul business and a lot of drop and hooks and everything like that. Somebody else is in long haul. Somebody else is in long haul and they have teams as opposed to solos. So you got to fit your niche. I think one of the biggest things as owners of our business is we need to be able to tell our story. And it's, this is part of retention. It's also from our other topic before, recruiting. What is the compelling story? Why should somebody work for me as opposed to working somewhere else? Well, the best person to tell that story is me or somebody that's close to me as part of our team. And, so like I was saying, words and actions. Well, one of the things is that we're probably not known for having the highest pay scale, but our benefits are, there's very few companies that have better benefits than ours. I know they're out there, but we have really good benefit plan. And I've had people ask me, Steve, how can you afford to do that? And my response always is, well, how can you afford not to? And it's interesting. We will spend anywhere from $8,000 to maybe $15,000 a year on maintenance on a truck. Even if you just figured 10 cents a mile and 150,000 miles a year, there's 15 grand. That you'll spend to maintain your truck, but still in 3 to 5 years, that truck's going to be wore out and you have to replace it. Why would we not spend a similar amount of money? Maybe it's not 15,000, but why not spend and have generous health insurance so that the driver can take care of his health? Because when you sell that truck and buy a new one, that driver can still be there driving the next truck and the next truck and the next truck. So I think some of this goes back to the mindset of, say, our ancestors, if you will, of people that were in business in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. You work here, and if you don't like your job, leave. We got somebody that's a replacement, and and that was just it, take it or leave it type thing. And today, it's more of the employee market than it is the employer market. And so consequently, their mindset is, and rightfully so, what's in it for me? Well, if you join us, not only do we have good insurance, we have good insurance, and our insurance is effective the first of the month. So if somebody comes to work for me on the 30th, 2 days later, they have health insurance. And it's like, why not? If your truck broke down, you'll spend money to fix it. But if your employee breaks down, well, you're on your own. So that's just one simple one. We have some other benefits too, like short-term disability. We absorb the expense on that. We have a very generous vacation plan, and all of those things cost money. But with my financial advisors, we've sat down and said, what do these things cost versus how much does it cost to have a truck sitting and not produce revenue? And that's a number that all of us need to have. I know this is about retention, but my encouragement to everybody is know your numbers and understand them well enough so that you know when a truck is sitting, what am I missing out on?
I know every market is different, every labor market these days. And I'm curious, I'm sure there's people watching this going, I'm already paying 85 cents a mile in my market for my drivers. There's no way I can add on another $10,000 or $15,000 a year in health benefits because it's just, I can't do it. My P&L disappears at that point. Without getting into the specifics of each situation, do you find even within your team that one size fits all, or do you have to tailor it because a 30-year-old single driver might be looking for something totally different than a 45-year-old married driver with kids?
Yeah, that's true. And again, some of these benefits, many of them are optional. They can take them or not take them. And, if they don't take the benefit, they don't have the expense. I don't have the expense, but if they're wise, they will. It might even go back to, again, we're discussing retention, but the retention is that you're retaining the right person in the first place. And that goes back to the recruiting side. When we discuss compensation, we look at the entire package. This is what your paycheck is, but here's what we're paying for all these benefits. And then the big picture of X, whatever amount that is the total compensation. Now, yes, I understand the guys that already are maxed out on their wages, they don't have the margin to do this. I think the reality of it is that then at that point, you're maybe drivers are only going to stick around, say, 6 months. If you can figure out how to get them to stick around for a year, you've just doubled your retention time, which means you don't have to recruit their replacement. I have accepted in my business that some people are going to use me as a stepping stone to go on to something better. As long as they treat me right and well, and I can treat them right and well, I wish them well in their next endeavor. And I've actually helped some people move on to, like, Steve, I need to find a daytime job, and I don't have any day openings in that market. I've only got night, and they've moved to something else, treated me well in their exit, and that's life, and that's the difference between employees today versus 10, 20, 30 years ago.
You mentioned employees are always looking at WIIFM, and I actually wrote a book a while back, and there was a chapter to that where I talked about everybody's favorite radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me, right?
That's right.
Do you find yourself having to tailor your comp packages even more now than you used to, because people have different forms of currency? By that, I mean, healthcare might be a form of currency, time off might be a form of currency, home every night could be a form of currency, opportunity for learning or growing, or opportunity to move to another location. What are some of the biggies that you see that help you keep your team happy?
Well, that's one thing that all of us probably could improve on, is that, bigger companies do this where they have, like, they call it a cafeteria style, buffet style, whatever. And you could let the employee, insurance isn't that big a deal to me, but I would like to have more time off. Well, okay, I understand that. And if you can accommodate them, that's great. But if you're going to have somebody on full time, but they're only going to be working 75% of the time, you can't have 100% expense. And you're paying 100%, but you're only getting 75% productivity, because now you have to either hire another full-time person, part-time person, whatever, and move them around. I think more of the I can't call it negotiating, but more of the adaptation that we do is, a lot of it is around schedule. Some guys is like, hey, it works better for me to work Sunday through Thursday. One fella came to me and said, I am willing to work long hours, but I only want to work 4 days a week. And I said, fine, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, because I needed somebody for the weekends. And he said, fine. So he's getting what he wants, and I tailored that to him. It didn't really upset anybody. So sometimes we have to adapt. Now the work's got to be there. The other side of this is that employee contentment. There are some employees that just aren't content, and they're eventually going to move on anyway, and that may be the best thing for the organization.
Okay, so can you put some numbers around that? What do you think is a healthy amount of turnover for a contractor?
Oh gosh, that is really hard to quantify, because mine is probably only about 20-25% on an annual basis. If you're running all teams, those guys would have to speak for themselves. But the stories that I've heard, they may be up, 50 to even as high as 70, 75, 80% turnover. That being said, I talked to a team operator about 2-3 weeks ago, had lunch with him, and he's right now he needs 4 drivers, but he needs 4 drivers out of 20. But the core, out of 20, say the 16 that are there, he's got guys that have been there 8, 9, 10, 12 years, whatever. So everybody is going to have a different number, and a lot of that still goes back to how well do you treat your people, and and treating them means, again, back to not just the actions but the words. And the gentleman that I was talking to, for example, I know him. I've known him, for 10+ years, and he's just a great guy to work for. And he takes care of his people.
We talked last time about the cost of getting a driver, filling an empty seat, right? And these days you hear all kinds of crazy numbers just in terms of the cost of the advertising and possibly signing bonuses and all those kinds of things, right?
Right.
Can you give a sense of what it costs to not have a driver because you didn't keep them happy, in terms of the time without somebody in the seat? And then, like, it seems to me that if you've got a good driver and it would cost you $5 to $10 grand to replace that person, and you'd have someone not in the seat for a while, that ought to drive your thinking about what you'd be willing to pay that person to keep them if they're a good driver.
Right. And I heard somebody speak, oh, this was probably about 4 years ago, of, we need to know the cost of retention versus the cost of replacement, because sometimes maybe a replacement's the way to go, because, bottom line of everything that we do, you can only get 100 pennies out of a dollar. But back to, I use the term contribution to overhead. We get paid from FedEx and we pay our wages. We have our, FICA, work comp benefits, fuel, and allocation for maintenance. That might be 4, 5, 6%, whatever it is, depends on what your rate structure is. And then what's left over is what you've got available for overhead. You're going to make truck payments out of there. You're going to pay for the office and your personal things and whatever. And I've heard numbers anywhere from 1,500, maybe even a little bit less than that, to clear on up to 2,000, possibly more dollars per week. So you take like somebody that's running a team, after they pay their expenses, they should have $2,000 a week left over for overhead, not for profit. I want to make that really clear. They've got that $2,000 that's being contributed to the overhead. Well, if they don't get that $2,000 and they've got a truck payment, the profits of another truck have to be allocated over to pay for this truck that's not working. So, a number that I have used is that if it was going to cost, and this is, again, on the recruiting side, it possibly could be used on the retention side. But if getting a driver or keeping a driver costs $5,000, and if you had margin of say $1,200 a week, 4 weeks is 4,800. There's a fraction there of a month, so $5,000 a month is the margin, is a contribution to overhead that you should get. Well, so the question, the way I frame it, is would you be willing to trade 1 month's margin to get a driver that would now produce revenue for you for 11 months? Well, the answer to that always is yes. I would gladly trade 1 month of margin to get a driver so that the 11 other months of the year I don't have to worry about it. Well, and maybe the number isn't $5,000. Maybe it's $2,500, whatever it is that you're willing to pay. I'll give an example. We have, most of our markets we're paying hourly right now. And after your first year anniversary, you get $1,000. Next year is $1,250, $1,500, $1,750, and then $2,000. So you take and add that all up, and it boils down to it's only costing you about $30 a week to pay off those bonuses over a 5-year period. I think if you and I went to lunch today, we'd spend $30.
Right.
But we won't set $30 aside for the driver and give it to him in a lump sum later on as a bonus for retention or whatever it is. So I think, again, it's some old school thinking, but writing out a check for $1,000, like, but $20 at a time. We don't look at, when we write out those checks, what did this cost us over time? And you always hear, companies having, if they have financial trouble, death by 1,000 cuts. I've always said that a company like mine doesn't fail because we made $100,000 mistake. We fail because we bled to death $100 at a time.
And again, I don't run a line haul operation day to day, but I sometimes hear contractors take this attitude of these sons of guns work for me and they'll do whatever I tell them. And if they don't like it, they can take a walk. And I think in this market, that seems like a very dangerous way to operate your business.
But yeah, that's the thinking of, 30, 40 years ago. Today, I'm an employer and I need to have them perform what is the requirements of the job, but you're also becoming a counselor, and you're we have people come to us and they have some really strange, family of origin issues, or they've got a problem with, something going on at home, a child that's ill or whatever. And again, the workplace used to be that, you had the chance to sit down because we were all together and have conversations. Now, I think the employer that treats his drivers like they're paper towels, just use them up and throw them away, that's not sustainable. Your reputation gets out there that, hey, this is either a good place to work for or not a good place to work.
Well, and I would think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you have that approach, then they're going to treat you like they are disposable and they're going to take off anyway.
Right.
for 3 cents more a mile, and screw you.
Right.
But I do kind of wonder, like, if it really costs $5,000, or in some cases 10 grand to get a driver, and your typical solo driver maybe is doing you about 100,000 miles. I know my math is a little off, but if you're paying them 60 cents a mile and it would cost you five grand to replace them, and they're a good driver, I would think 65 cents a mile becomes a no-brainer if that would make them happy.
Well, right. And again, you got to have some good spreadsheets and be sure that the numbers are fitting your budget. But the cash flow of it, I guess, is my point, is that some drivers, giving them that nickel a mile, there's just something about us in human nature. You get together and you start bragging, I make 20 bucks an hour. Oh, I make 22 bucks an hour. Well, what really matters at the end of the year is how much was your W-2, and did you have the quality of life that you want? But like in my case, where we've got guys that are getting $2,000 check, if I could have checked this week to somebody for $2,000 because they've been here for 5 years, how much revenue have they produced for me over that 5-year period for $2,000? I mean, against the entire operation, it's not a nickel a mile; it's fractions of that.
But I've always thought I've been a good employee when I've worked for different folks. But during the course of my life, I've had different things that I cared about. And there were periods in my life where every penny mattered in order to make rent and whatnot. And I was focused entirely on how much cash am I getting? And I would put up with a lot of BS to get as much cash as possible. But then in a different phase in my life, I was more interested in how much security. I'm married now. How much security and healthcare benefits are they? I'm willing to take less pay because I've saved up some money. How do you tune your antenna to that when you're talking to drivers to keep your finger on it? Because they're not in your office every day, right? They're out there in a truck.
Well, and like you said, it changed for you in your life cycle. The same is true for them. One of the things would be, again, gets back to this communication, and that can be in the interview when you're bringing them on board, or again, we're not as good as we should be at this, but have what we call wellness conversations. Call a driver up and just say, hi, how are you doing? How are the kids? How's, whatever, know a little bit about them. And you can see and you can sense and you can detect if things are changing. I've got one driver that I know right now, money is a big deal to them. They had some illness, and they got an ill child, a special needs child, whatever, and they need to be able to make as much money as possible. And I'm looking at ways to give them extra work and give them extra money to help them out. But the truth is, and I've done this twice with 2 other people, and both of them were successful. I need to go to this driver and say, look, you need to take Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University class. I'll pay for it. And when it's over, the requirement is that you got to take the class. If you skip the class and don't complete, then I'm going to take the tuition out of your check. 2 people I've done that previously, and both of them afterwards came to me, thanked me for doing it, and in both cases were able to get nicer houses, nicer cars, or whatever, because they got their life in order. Some people may say, well, I'm just a boss and I just do a paycheck. I'm not supposed to do that. Well, you're a great employer in 1990.
So again, I'm going to talk out of my ass a little bit here, but I got to get your opinion on this. I talk to contractors all the time. And more often than not, in a 30-minute conversation, they have to stop what they're talking about with me at least 3 or 4 times because someone has come into their office, or more importantly, their phone has rung or a text has come in. They got to talk to a driver right now. They got to respond to an issue with a breakdown. They got to talk to the terminal. They got to do all this other stuff. Your typical contractor doesn't have free time, right?
Right.
And I'm sure that they would say, who's got time to make wellness calls? Who's got time to check in with drivers? And it seems to me that if you're a staffing agency, which is what being a FedEx ground contractor is, if you don't make that time, you're absolutely missing one of your most important functions. But I don't know how you delegate that.
Well, yeah, it might be that you don't. It might be, and again, it gets back to who are the people in your organization that you can trust. Maybe some of those phone calls and maybe some of those interruptions can be delegated. Going clear back to when my dad was in the industry, and it was a unionized LTL carrier that we were connected with. And back then, whatever the union rate was, they would have what they called a lead driver, and that lead driver got an extra 50 cents. Of course, this is back in the 70s, but 50 cents is 50 cents. So, but they were getting an extra 50 cents an hour to be the lead driver. So they would come in, if the starting time was 5 a.m., that person came in at 4 a.m. and they set up the day and the routes and all that type of stuff. And so you think about it, 50 cents an hour, 40 hours a week, that's $20, $1,000 a year. How do you hire a manager for $1,000 a year? So it might be that if you gave that much more money to your rock stars that are already working for you and say, hey, look, when the terminal needs to answer something, I'm going to have them call you first. And if you don't have an answer, then you guys call me. Well, now we just filtered out a third of our phone calls, 50% of our phone calls. I have been doing that for many, many years. And some of those guys that have been lead drivers for me have moved on to higher roles with me. And some of them have left and they've got higher roles at another organization. And I just feel blessed that I was able to enhance their career, that they could move on to something that's greater than what I could offer. So I agree, there's only 24 hours in a day and you can't spend all your time on the phone, but some of it is like preventive maintenance and call it preventive medicine. If we spend a little bit of time talking to that driver and explaining things to that driver, then maybe they don't need to call from the terminal because, hey, no, I know that when I do this, I'm supposed to do that. And we don't have to be interrupted. So that gets back to investing in our people. We need to train. We need to coach. We need to, just ruling with an iron fist, the hammer, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't work. But if you engage your people in the understanding what the operation is, and I think we do a poor job of that. It took me 18 months to figure out how FedEx worked back in 1995, 1996. It changes so much. We need to be able to explain to the drivers that, hey, because of the dynamics of the market, these things are going to change, but it's okay. I've got your back, and here's how we're going to compensate you. To me, it's not, don't eliminate the wellness call, eliminate the other, I'm going to call them nonsense calls that you can either delegate or fix by having a pre-planned decision.
I have a background in commercial real estate. Shopping centers, office buildings, that kind of thing. And I talk to people in that space periodically. And there is a common misconception, and it's reinforced, unfortunately, by accounting. Okay. People in commercial real estate who are not doing well believe that their assets are the buildings because that's what it says on their balance sheet. Right.
Right.
A building is nothing but a depreciating pile of bricks, mortar, roofs, plumbing, and wire that you have to constantly be putting money into. The asset, if you're doing well in commercial real estate, is your tenants, the people who are willing to open their wallet and pay their rent every month on time. And if you ignore your tenants in commercial real estate, you're doomed for high vacancy and high turnover. And to me, the parallel seems obvious in the linehaul contracting space. Even though your balance sheet says your asset is the truck, the real asset is the driver, because that's the person who's willing to show up every day and not call off and put the miles in order to get you paid by FedEx. Is that a fair statement? I
think it's more than fair. I think it's really you didn't need to interview me. You should have just come out and said that. That's the secret sauce. That's the missing ingredient. There's a lot of lip service, well, what are our human assets? Well, but they're people. They're not trucks. They're not buildings. They're people. That being said, if we're willing to, oh gosh, I've got this mall and I'm going to paint it so it looks better so I can get a tenant. Okay, you just painted bricks and mortar. I'm going to go put chrome wheels on my truck. It's nice to look good going down the highway and everything like that. But you got to invest in your people. If they're assets, then let's invest in them. Invest our time and invest our talent and invest our treasures. And I have people that have called me, employees, and Steve, I'm having this problem, because my son did this, and I got a daughter that did this, and her fiance, her boyfriend, or her husband, whatever, and they've actually talked to me about things that you wouldn't think that you would have with an employer, but I've made myself available to work with the whole them. This idea that you've got your work as this compartment, and your family life is this, and your social life is that, and your financial life is this, and your community life is that, and maybe your spiritual life is this, whatever. We're more in a integrated world today where all this stuff overlaps. And so if a driver, and again, I'm going to go back to this hot button of health insurance. If a driver is driving down the road and he's thinking about, man, I got to come up with extra money because my kid needs braces, or so-and-so is going to need surgery or whatever, and he's thinking about that and he's not thinking about driving, you've got a distraction risk there that could result in an accident. But if he knows that, hey, they've got insurance here, and if my kid gets sick, I know that it's not going to cost me an arm and a leg. Well, they might be worrying about something else or talking on the phone about something else, but you've removed that worry. If we're going to call them human assets, then let's invest in them.
Look, here in Atlanta, I could show you side-by-side shopping centers with the newer, freshly painted one that's got 40% vacancy and is offering the same rent as the one right next door that's a little beat up and looking wear and tear, and they don't have a single vacancy, and they might even be charging more rent. And it's all about the owner and or the manager putting in the time to make those tenants feel like they're welcome and valued. And
right.
I hear stories from contractors, and I think to myself, man, I wouldn't want to work for you either if that's your attitude. And other folks who, and look, our software, when they call us up and we're doing a support thing, we can see their numbers. These guys who are doing really well, they put their people first. Yes, they have to do everything else, but to your point, putting the people first means they show up, they get the miles in, the revenue comes in, and then you have more money to deal with any of the other problems. But when you're struggling to get a guy to show up 5 days a week, you're already behind the eight ball.
I want to share something from the author Ken Blanchard, and he's probably one of the top leaders in the United States about employee engagement, employee health, things like that. Not just physical health, but having a healthy organization. Like he and Lencioni are two of the tops. But the thing that Blanchard says is that you have to have both results and relationships. And so you think about it. If it's all about the relationship with the driver, but we fail at FedEx, or you can only get 100 pennies out of a dollar, you go broke, but you were focusing on the relationship side. Now, that doesn't work. But if you only focus on results and don't focus on the relationship, well, you got the same problem over in the other lane. Here's the secret sauce, I think. Take especially a couple, you're married, or you're living with somebody, you're dating, whatever the thing is. My wife and I have been married for 45 years. You should say that, okay, we have a 50-50 responsibility to each other on a relationship. Wrong. She doesn't want 50% of me. I don't want 50% of her. We both have to give 100%. So the secret to me is you got to give 100% of yourself to producing results, but you got to give 100% of yourself to the relationship with your drivers. Well, that's 200%. Yeah, we can't get a 48-hour day. That's the thing that's implied, is that you have to balance your focus. And when I say balance, there's a time that you really got to just be able to sit down and counsel with the driver. And there's other times that you just got to say, hey, look, I'm declaring an emergency. We got a problem. There's an ice storm. We got to do da, 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 da. And we'll take care of the collateral damage after everything is done. But if we go at either of those half-baked, we're doomed to fail.
You mentioned something a minute ago that got my brain spinning. Safety as a factor with people being unhappy or distracted or whatnot. Obviously, safety is critical in the FedEx Ground world, right?
Right.
How do you approach that? Is that part of your thinking when you're thinking about keeping happy drivers and giving them what they need in wellness calls and things like that? Is that part of your safety thought?
Yeah, well, we don't sit down and say, hey, our safety plan is to have wellness calls. But we know that wellness calls contributes to safety. And when you say wellness call, some of it's just a reinforcement thing. Sometimes, and this gets back to learning how to communicate. I had this conversation with a manager of mine here a few years ago. We had 3 different people I used as illustrations. And I just said, if you had a problem that you had to deal with and you had to talk to these 3 people, would you talk to all 3 of them the same way? It's like, no, you know them well enough. One of them was a lady. One was a young guy, maybe in his late 20s, early 30s. The other one was somebody in their 40s. And how I would approach them, or how this manager would approach them and talk to them, would be different styles or whatever, because you know your team, what makes them tick, so to speak. So it's the improved safety is the collateral. We hear about collateral damage. This is collateral good. This spills over into safety, because a content driver is a focused driver. We hear a lot about distracted driving, right? The opposite of distraction is focus. So if you're focused on driving and not on a lot of other things, you just became a better driver.
I just happened a few months ago to get my private pilot's license. And one of the things that they drill into you as a pilot, even beginning like that, is that there's an acronym PAVE. It stands for Personal Aircraft Environment and External Pressures. And before you go up and fly, you need to sort of ask yourself, am I feeling okay? Am I feeling healthy? Is the plane in good shape? What kind of environment am I in? Was I out drinking last night? Whatever. And then what other external pressures am I dealing with? Is my spouse going in for surgery tomorrow? Is my job going off the rails? Those kinds of things. And it would seem to me that there's this intangible benefit to having happy, content drivers and being aware of what's going on in the world, so that if you know that they're dealing with external stress, you get in front of it, so that they're not, for example, on the cell phone while they're on the road because they're desperately trying to solve a problem unrelated to your business, and putting your asset, your truck, your business at risk for that, right?
Right.
And I know I'm getting into touchy-feely stuff, and most people will be like, you're out of your mind, but it would seem to me that it's very similar. You got someone in a big rig who, if they get into a fatal accident, it's at least a $20 million judgment. It's not dissimilar to someone going up in a little plane like I do and putting things at risk that way.
Well, let me ask it this way. If you had to have a stent put in because you have a heart problem, do you want your surgeon distracted by a fight that he had with his wife this morning, or do you want him paying attention?
Right. Or worse, do I want my surgeon hating the head of the Department of Surgery because his boss is an ass?
Right. And we're not surgeons, we're truck drivers, but you're right. 80,000 pound missile going down the highway at 60 mile an hour, we better have the right person behind the wheel.
Yeah. I mean, if you haven't seen one up close and personal, I'm sure you've seen video of what happened, or pictures of what happens when an 18-wheeler starts colliding with cars on an icy road, or because the driver was on the phone, not paying attention.
Right. Right.
But we've gotten kind of off topic. Keeping drivers. What's the big takeaway in your mind? Do contractors that you talk to pay enough attention to this, or is this a blind spot for them?
Well, I don't talk to that many contractors, but it's not so much that it's a blind spot. They just have not been convinced with the evidence of that this does pay off. And again, I understand completely that it has to fit the budget. But I'm the old guy. I have all these old examples. They're back in the late 60s, early 70s. There was the Fram filters had this commercial. This guy is underneath the hood of the car, and it opens up, and he sticks his head up, and he says, "Pay me now or pay me later." You can use a good filter on your car and get more life out of it, or you can use a substandard product and you may not get the life out of your vehicle. Same thing with your employees. There's a lot of things that we look at are investments, and then others are expenses. You said it really brilliantly when you were comparing with the commercial real estate market. Some of the things like painting the building is an expense, but it's also an investment in that one of the reasons you would do that is because you're going to invest in that painting because you're expecting it to get a return. when we invest in our drivers, we're expecting a return. And yeah, it goes back to the balance sheet. The thing that shows up on the balance sheet is the asset, the truck, the building. But the driver, when we invest in the driver and they're our revenue producer, then that long-term relationship with them is what keeps us in business. So again, our human assets need to be, like if every month, if we're looking at our balance sheet and financial statement, every month we should probably look at our employee roster and just see how well are these people doing. And we probably don't.
No,
I know I don't do it enough.
But the thing that keeps banging around in my head is everybody thinks employee retention is about an extra 10 cents a mile, full benefits, dental, vision, and a 401k plan. More money, more money, more money. And my point was, it's not always about more money, because there are guys out there who could offer me a lot of money to work for them. They don't have enough money in the world for me to want to work for them. And there's other people who I would gladly go work for a lot less than I make, because I would want to work for them. And so for folks who are sitting there trying to figure out, well, how do I compete in this market? Realize that there's a lot of things that you can do that require time. And maybe you don't have enough time, so you wish you could throw a nickel or a dime a mile at it to solve the problem. But time might be the currency that you need to spend to make your drivers happy, by really being interested in their welfare and in connecting with them to do that. And I do know there are some contractors out there, I won't name names, but they do an amazingly good job of this. And they have a fantastic driver team. And as a result, they're growing like gangbusters, because those drivers are telling other drivers, dude, they may not be the top paying, but you need to work for these folks. These people care about you.
Right.
So, yeah, but you may be in a market where you got to throw that nickel or dime at them. I don't know.
Right. Well, and again, this goes back to the communication side. That nickel or dime can be added to their paycheck, or you can say, hey, look, we'll do this, but we'll do it in some lump sum increments, or give them rewards or whatever. You're still going to spend the money, but the fact that they see and they know that it's there for them, again, back to that bonus structure that I have. Yes, their wages are their wages, and they are deserving of every cent of that they get on every paycheck. But to keep a driver over a 5-year period, if the average cost to me is $30 a week, 100 weeks is only $3,000, and I think you're getting pretty close to costing $3,000 now for a set of tires for a tractor, with a tandem axle tractor. Might even be more than that, probably a lot more than that.
Yeah. I mean, back to the real estate thing. I know folks who own apartments and single family homes, and they'll tell you, you sign a 1-year lease and they move out at the end of the year, you're vacant at least a month or two. So you ain't collecting rent. And what would it have cost you to have sent a gift basket and to called occasionally and to do this and that they want to sign an extension and not leave the place empty for another month or two?
Right.
Right. I mean, the similarities got to be, there's some connection to that, right?
So, well, and as business owners, we need to understand our business, understand our people, understand our finances. It goes back to that relationship result combination, so that we can offer a compelling reason for them to stay. People leave for a lot of different reasons.
Some you can control, but some you can.
Right. And but the thing is that if the life expectancy of a driver is X, whatever, months or years or whatever it is, anything that you get beyond that is bonus, but it still ends up being that, again, what is your average and who are your rock stars? Because probably the thing you need to do is invest more in the rock stars, because the 20% that churn at the bottom are going to churn anyway. You don't have to mistreat them, but there was an article in Transport Topics here, it was about 2 years ago now, about a year and a half maybe, but signing bonuses, for example, was not even in the top 5. I think we maybe mentioned this in a different conversation. Signing bonuses were not that big a deal of why somebody would join an organization. They were more interested in how am I being treated, when am I getting home, what kind of equipment am I driving, things like that. Yeah, money was the big deal, but there's a lot of people right now that are more looking for quality of life. And that's hard. If you run teams and the guy's got to be gone for a week and you want to go to your kid's basketball game on Thursday, the truth is, nobody likes to hear this, but the truth is you might be working at the wrong place.
Or maybe you need to go to your boss and say, I need to switch to solo.
Right.
Right.
But maybe he doesn't have solo runs.
True.
We cannot please everybody all the time. I use this all the time. If you don't like the sight of blood, don't be a nurse.
Sure. But imagine the tragic case where you've got a great team driver who now is at a life stage where they want to be home more. And you also have solo runs and you didn't even know that that's what was bothering them. So they go to someone else to drive solo and they're a great team driver, a great solo driver there.
Right. Right.
I mean,
and you will not know that if you don't have a conversation.
Yep. Steve, what have I forgotten to talk to you about? Let me look at my notes here. We talked about, why would you want to work for when you're talking to people, what makes them tick? We talked about looking, what's different about today versus in the past, the cost of losing a driver, how mobility and things like that are so important to people today. Am I forgetting anything?
I don't think so. I think this does connect to the video we did before on recruiting. One thing that is always, I'll hear a lot of times, oh, I'm finally full. I don't need any drivers. We never really stop recruiting. We're always looking because we do have this mobile and you are going to lose 10% or 20% or 40% or whatever the number is. So that along with your retention plan, you still need to keep the pipeline flowing a little bit of names of people that potentially could join your organization because maybe you don't need them today, but you need them in 2 or 3 months. And if you've sold them on why it's good to work for your company, then hopefully you can get them when you need them. But, and a lot of times, hey, what are some good ways to find and have ways to connect with drivers? I know 2 people that you're connected with, Mitch Adams and Brian Muncie, have a lot of good input on the recruiting side. But the soft thing, because their input is based on like advertising, marketing, and things like that. And that's really good. But it still ends up our responsibility to hire the right person in the first place. If somebody really wants days and all I have is nights, well, I'll try it for a while. I'm going to have them 6 weeks, 8 weeks or something like that, and they're going to be gone. Maybe it's a Band-Aid, but hiring the right person in the first place, taking care of them in the long term, that's what makes it work.
Steve, thank you so much for giving your time today. This has been great.
It's always fun to do this. Good to see you, John.
Before we go, Steve, as a value add to the folks who've made it this far, I would just want to make sure, if you don't know, there's going to be a Linehaul Summit, the biggest trade show for Linehaul contractors ever this summer in Dallas. We're going to put the information right here in the video in post-production. There's also a Facebook group. If you're not on it, you should jump on it. There's over 400 contractors on there helping each other out, asking questions, offering routes for sale, you name it, it's on there. We're going to put that link there. And we now have a podcast. So if those of you who want to listen to these things are driving or too busy, you can get these audio only, and we'll put a link down there as well. And finally, I have been told a few times now that I'm doing a disservice to all of you by not mentioning what we do, Haldi Tech. We have software that's built specifically for Linehaul contractors. And we know that there's a number of challenges amongst many that you deal with, but we focus on giving you usable information from your settlement data to run your business, to helping you find missing money that FedEx didn't pay you for trips and fuel supplements. We help you do your payroll real fast and correctly, and keep your drivers happy that their paychecks are correct. And if you happen to be a TruckSpy customer and you're doing your own IFTA, we make that a matter of a couple clicks and you're done. So if you'd like to see what it can do for you, I'm always happy to give demos and free trials and that kind of stuff. So give me a shout if you're interested. There's over 100 contractors who are on the system, and we think we're doing something right because they tell us they like what we're doing. So we'd be happy to share it with you.
And I can provide a testimonial for that. I've been using your service since I became aware of it last June. So we're coming up pretty close to a 1-year anniversary. And for me, what works is when I upload the data to you, get your reports. There's some things that are unique to my company that I want to know, but I've got those down to more like macros that go into spreadsheets. And so Tuesday night, we get the data from FedEx. On Wednesday, I know how I did last week. And these key indicators for me of percentage of labor, percentage of fuel, percentage of maintenance is kind of fixed. And then what the contribution to overhead is. Yesterday already, I was studying the numbers of the previous week. And so, what John's company is providing not only is quality, but the fact that we have quick answers, because we live in a world where everything happens really fast. We can't find out that we made a mistake 3 months ago. We need to find out we made a mistake 3 days ago.
Well, thank you for that, Steve. Folks, thank you for tuning in. We're looking forward to part 4. Steve and I haven't talked about the topic, but we will get that nailed down soon, and we'll get the next iteration of this series out to you very, very soon. Steve, have a great day. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye.